Nobody knows where they are.
It started to lead towards foul play.
Those were big red flags.
So I definitely want justice.
My brother didn't deserve this, and neither did she.
Take a look at this clip. This is Jarrod Baum. He looks at the camera as if he doesn't understand why he's being held in cuffs and on trial. Or perhaps he doesn't agree with his sentence. In 2017, Jarrod Baum was charged with 2 counts of aggravated murder, kidnapping, and desecration of a body. These were very serious allegations, and he was a part of the very tiny community of Eureka. They caused outrage. People thought they knew him. They thought they knew everyone in their little ghost town, but he was a monster. And it took the loss of 2 innocent lives to reveal his true personality. Trigger warning, today's case contains the topics of extreme violence and death. If that's not something you can handle, this is your chance to turn back. Otherwise, let's dive into the case of the teen who was forced to watch her boyfriend be killed by a vicious pervert. Our story begins in a small town in Utah called Eureka. Its name might sound optimistic. The Greek word celebrates a discovery or invention. But the town of Eureka is not such a bubbly place. In fact, it's a ghost town, home to just over 600 people. Like most ghost towns, Eureka is an abandoned mining town, with most people having left the place when the industry died out.
This is a very small town. It's classified as a ghost town.
You might think it's probably very boring to live in a ghost town, especially as a young person. You're probably right, but there's upsides too. Think about it. Everyone knows and trusts each other. Criminality is really low in such small places. The people of Eureka were like one big happy family. People visited each other without having to plan it weeks ahead, and they could rely on each other to babysit or help with other basic needs when required.
You've got whole families who are living in this town who have known each other for, in some cases, generations.
Sure enough, the inhabitants of Eureka, just like all other ghost towns, are getting older. As you might have guessed, all the youngsters are spreading their wings and pursuing their dreams in the big cities. But back in 2017, there was still a young generation in Eureka, even though it comprised a handful of teens. One of them was Breezy Otson. Braylon Otson called herself Breezy. She was born in 2000, and she was a kind and playful girl who always kept a smile on her face, no matter how difficult things got. But things had always been tough for Breezy. She had a tragic childhood, to say the least. Her father had left the family when she was just a baby, and her mom lost her life in a horrific car accident when she was 11 years old. Breezy and her mom were really close, and this tragedy was a huge blow to the family.
She's grown up a very difficult life. She lost her mother about 6 years ago. She just wanted to be loved.
Breezy and her sisters were adopted by their grandfather, who also lived in Eureka. He was kind and supportive, but it was very hard for the sisters to adapt to this new life. However, it would be another change in Breezy's life that made her feel happy and hopeful. In 2017, Breezy started dating a boy who made her feel loved and accepted. From the very start, Breezy was sure he was the one.
Do you feel like this may have been just a teenage fling, or was this something serious?
No, I felt like it was serious.
This was a meaningful relationship.
She felt safe with him.
Riley Powell was 18, so just 1 year older than Breezy. Riley and Breezy had a lot of things in common. They grew up in this tiny town, and they'd grown up with their grandfathers. Riley's mom, Misty, had given him up for adoption when he was very young. Throughout her whole life, she struggled with illegal substance abuse. She thought she'd turn her life around when she had her son, but when she fell back into her habits, she entrusted her stepfather with Riley's care. Strangely enough, she lived just a few doors down, but she didn't want to be a part of Riley's life. Nevertheless, this didn't bother Riley too much. Riley and his grandpa Bill were the best of buddies. They did everything together, and in all respects, Bill felt like a father to Riley.
And you're Riley's father, correct?
Right, I adopted him.
You and Linda split up, but you had primary custody of Riley?
Well, we both had joint custody of all the kids, but I pretty much had him then, and she had the 2 girls.
Was Riley happy?
Seemed to be.
So at one point, Riley's grandparents got a divorce, and this split his family further. Riley stayed with Bill, and his 2 sisters moved in with their grandma, Linda. Split, unstable families were something that both Breezy and Riley had to endure. But They had both grown into mature, loving people. Perhaps it was the very hardship that made them realize how important it is to stick together. So Breezy and Riley might have been very young, but they were a solid couple, and they had big plans for the future. Before Breezy turned 18, she moved in with Bill and Riley. The two lovebirds had their whole lives ahead, and things were looking up for both of them. Tragically, they would never get to make plans together or live their lives as they pleased. It would all end very soon. Breezy and Riley were very excited about the 2017 winter holidays. It was going to be their first Christmas and New Year's together, and they'd been counting down the days. On Christmas Day, the couple stayed with Bill and Riley's sisters. But just before New Year's, they decided to celebrate the holidays with Breezy's extended family in Thule, about an hour's drive away from Eureka. On December 30th, 2017, Riley and Breezy drove over to Breezy's aunt, Amanda. The three of them had dinner together, and Breezy shared an exciting piece of news. She thought she was pregnant. You might think, whoa, they're young, but Breezy wasn't scared at all. She was excited to start a family with her boyfriend. Amanda was excited too. She'd never seen her niece this happy. When the evening was over, Breezy hugged her aunt goodbye, and the two got in their car, ready to head back to Eureka. Little did Amanda know she would be the last family member to see Breezy or Riley alive. The late hours of December 30th passed quickly, as everyone was busy getting ready for the New Year's party the next day. But Riley's family was waiting for the young couple to get back home, and they were getting giddy with anticipation. Soon enough, they were getting worried. Remember, it's just an hour's drive from Thule to Eureka. Where could Riley and Breezy be? And why weren't they answering their phones? In fact, when Bill tried to reach Riley, it seemed like his phone was off. This was unlike Riley. Both he and Breezy were always available to their families. Something was off. They wouldn't just run off into the sunset without notifying their families.
When Riley and Breezy go missing, communication drops, you say December 30th, right?
Yes.
Nobody hears from them, no social media activity?
No social media activity, no debit card activity, no one has seen their vehicle, nobody knows where they are.
Imagine how strange this is in a tiny town where everyone knows each other's whereabouts. People simply aren't getting used to people going missing. Riley and Breezy's families rang up everyone they thought was friendly with the two. Perhaps they had decided to meet up with someone else before New Year's Eve, and something happened to their phones. Their families were hopeful, at least for the first few days, but that year they celebrated New Year's Day alone, crying for their grandkids. So in the early hours of January 2nd, 2018, the two grandfathers met up at the Dwab County Sheriff's Office and filed a missing person report.
We received a report through the Sheriff's Office on January 2nd of them reported missing. They'd been missing estimated, 2 or 3 days.
2 or 3 days is a huge amount of time for a victim to be missing. And to make things much worse, the average temperatures were in the low 20s. If there had been an accident, the two would have frozen to death by now. That is not what happened to Breezy and Riley, but it would take an awful lot of time for the police to get an answer. The detectives started the investigation by looking through Riley and Breezy's social media accounts. If they had been threatened by someone, or if they were about to meet someone on December 30th, this is where it would become clear. Indeed, it wasn't long before they uncovered some odd conversations on Facebook. Riley had been chatting with Morgan Henderson. What was pretty strange was that Morgan was a whole generation older than the couple. She had no relation to either of their families, and she didn't live in Eureka. She lived in Mammoth, a short drive away. There was another red flag. The last messages between Riley and Morgan were tracked to December 30th, the very evening Riley and Breezy went missing. So the officers invited Morgan to an interview. Morgan was cooperative and sat down to talk to the cops. She told them that on the evening of December 30th, the two had stopped by her place in Mammoth on the way from Thule to Utah. They had a chat and a drink and left after about 40 minutes. The couple drove off, and that was the last time she saw them. The officers were satisfied with Morgan's answers. As far as their research showed, there were no signs of foul play, so they had to let her go. So Riley and Breezy's case became a search and rescue operation. It was most likely, they thought, that the two had gotten lost or in a terrible accident that night. But that is not to say that they didn't take the search seriously. By January 3rd, law enforcement agencies from Utah, friends, and family of the couple were searching the 10,000 square mile area between Tule and Eureka. In fact, pretty much everyone in Eureka had joined the search party. This was such a strange event, and the more days passed, the more people were worried for Riley and Breezy's lives. But not everyone in Eureka was looking for the teens. Shockingly, Riley's own mother, Misty, was missing from the search party.
In the beginning, I had reached out to Misty, Riley's biological mother. She didn't respond back to me. The first initial search on January 5th, we would have thought that she would have been there, but she had messaged me the night before and said, "Thanks, wish I could do more," whatever that means.
There's a lot you could do, right?
Exactly. Those were big red flags.
What sort of mother would be uninterested in searching for her missing son? Was there more than substance abuse behind Misty's avoidance? Bill, on the other hand, never missed one search. In fact, he barely took any breaks from sunrise to sundown.
Bill, the first 7 days from when the kids went missing, he took his days from sunup to sundown. He was searching for those kids.
But even he got tired after a while. It seemed like no matter how much the police were extending their search radius, the teens were nowhere to be found. So Bill and Breezy's family simply put up a $2,000 reward for any information leading to Riley and Breezy's discovery. In the announcement, they mentioned their Jeep car. Wherever they'd gone, they were driving their Jeep.
We were looking for a Jeep, not kids at that point, thinking the Jeep was our key to finding them.
In fact, it was pretty strange that no one had seen the Jeep for so long. But finally, on January 11th, the Civil Air Patrol found Riley's Jeep, parked near the Cherry Creek Reservoir, a mere 14 miles from Eureka.
So then once we found the Jeep, then as we started to investigate the Jeep further, then it started to lean towards foul play.
Hidden in the bushes, there's windows rolled down, 2 of the tires have been slashed, they've been cut from the sides, not necessarily from running over something.
Here is where it gets creepy. Riley and Breezy's clothes were inside the car, but they were perfectly clean. There was no blood marks on them, and there were 0 signs of struggle inside the car. Still, someone had attacked the car's tires. The sheriff started seeing a possible scenario.
Where that Jeep was located, both the tires were deflated in place. Evidence there at the scene suggested that Jeep was driven into that park location, and then the tires were deflated subsequent to that.
In other words, someone had staged this, and they cut the tires to distract the police from the place they should really be looking. But now there were more questions than answers. Who were the suspects? Was Morgan on the list? Or Riley's mom? But what would be their motivation? As the investigators looked at every little detail inside the car, they noticed an interesting piece of evidence: a camouflage-colored towel strap. Now, the officers were pretty certain they were looking at foul play.
It is foul play. I believe that. I strongly believe that.
This is when a witness contacted the police. He claimed to have seen someone towing Riley's Jeep on the same day that the 2 were reported missing. And remember, Eureka is a ghost town where everyone knows each other. So the witness easily identified the driver as Lee Shepard, Misty's boyfriend. Slowly but surely, a nasty case was building around Riley's questionable mom. As soon as the officer heard the witness account, he rallied up his colleagues and visited Misty's house. This was also where Lee lived at that time. When Misty heard the allegations, she was pretty shocked. She said she had no idea why Lee would do that, and she didn't know that it had happened. However, Lee was not as cooperative.
He's refused to interview with our detectives. You're correct.
That sounds like a major red flag.
It is. It's a red flag. It's something that heightens our suspicion.
Needless to say, the officers returned to Misty and Lee's home with a search warrant. By now, they knew they were looking at a potential homicide.
Police are searching their house. The police are not only searching their house, they're looking for evidence that what is at Misty and Lee's house could have something to do with their disappearance and could have something to do with them being potentially murdered.
The detectives turned their house upside down, only to reveal various illegal substances and unpaid bills. But right when they were getting ready to end the search, one officer noticed a camouflage-colored toe strap. That's right, it was the twin of the strap found inside the car. So Lee was clearly up to no good. But what were his intentions? After the police couldn't get him to talk, Crime Watch went over to Misty's mobile home and got a few answers.
Somebody out there knows what happened to my son, and it's not me. I wouldn't hurt my son. Yeah, I gave him up for adoption.
Misty felt guilty for giving Riley up for adoption, but she explained this did not make her guilty of his disappearance.
I went through my lifestyle, yes, and my lifestyle up, but you know what, I didn't do anything to my son.
Misty also mentioned that she and Lee were no longer together. However, Crime Watch found him just down the road.
The sheriff says you won't talk to him or his investigators.
I talked to him.
He says you're not cooperating. Not my words.
Well, the first time they come out, I had cupboards out and painting, and my truck was broke down, and they want to go right then. I said, can I come in tomorrow? He's like, another day? I said, well, yeah, you know.
Lee strongly denied having anything to do with Breezy and Riley's disappearance, and he said it wasn't really him towing the Jeep. The police were hand-tied. Without probable cause or a body, they could not arrest Lee. The tow straps simply weren't enough. But the more time passed, the more they felt they'd reached a dead end. Everyone in Eureka was a suspect, but at the same time, no one was suspicious enough to arrest. In April 2018, the officers decided to make one last effort in investigation. They brought specialized dogs all the way from Tallahassee, Florida, to sniff around the area between Tooele and Eureka.
So we're gonna go out west of Eureka, out to the Cherry Creek area, Cherry Creek Reservoir area, where the Riley's Jeep was located.
After a day-long drive, the team arrived in the tiny town, sparking up hopes for Breezy and Riley once more.
We have a human remains canine, which Paul Martin, who's an expert in the field, anthropologist, forensic anthropologist, will be working that dog.
That's not all. The dogs were followed by drones in real time, with a team of officers ready to rush into any suspicious area. Incredibly enough, not even the dogs or drones could find Breezy and Riley. This was a first, even for the Florida team, who had seen much more cases than the Eureka police. As far as the police were concerned, Breezy and Riley's case was a cold case. But 2 weeks later, a stroke of luck and a change of mind turned the case upside down. In the early hours of March 28, 2018, the police were notified about an arrest. Immediately, the police contacted the teenagers' families.
It was this morning that we got the call, and it was drop everything and go.
A woman had been arrested that day for speeding. No biggie, right? Except this woman was Morgan Henderson, and she had completely changed her story about the 40 minutes she'd spent with Breezy and Riley. Now she was saying that both of them were dead, and that she knew where the bodies were buried.
Details in the investigation led us to this location.
As soon as she made her confession, Morgan led the police to an abandoned mine on private property, 22 miles away from Cherry Creek Reservoir, where Riley's Jeep was found abandoned. The shaft was 1,800 feet deep. On a ledge 100 feet down, the police discovered the bodies of Breezy and Riley, thrown down like garbage. Imagine keeping your hopes up for months, then discovering your loved ones in this state. And imagine how frustrating it must be to know they were right under your nose the whole time.
We've searched a lot of country, and then, to find them out that they're this close.
In a sad twist, Breezy's aunt Amanda had thought of checking the mine shaft from the first day the couple went missing, but it was on private property, so they couldn't just go over there without a warrant. It took Eureka 3 whole months to learn the tragic end of Breezy and Riley, but the full horror of the story was yet to be revealed. After Morgan took the police to the mine shaft, of course, she had to tell them how she knew where they were. Here's where it gets horrible.
The reason we called for this press conference is to announce the charges against Jarrod Baum in relation to the kidnapping and the heinous and the depraved murders of Breezy Otteson and Riley Powell.
41-year-old Jarrod Baum was Morgan's boyfriend at the time. He was not a good partner. He was abusive and controlling, and Morgan felt stuck in this terrible relationship. His vile nature reached an all-time low just after Christmas 2017. When Breezy and Riley visited Morgan, Jarrod saw them together for the first time. He became infuriated with the fact that she'd been hanging out with the couple without his permission. This was enough to make him want to kill them. So he tied Breezy and Riley's hands and feet. Then he duct taped their mouths and shoved them in Riley's own Jeep. He drove them to the abandoned mine shaft. There, he made Breezy kneel and ordered her to watch. Breezy watched as her boyfriend was beaten, stabbed, and thrown down the shaft. She knew she was next, and she couldn't do anything about it. She couldn't even beg Jarrod for her life. Her mouth was duct taped. So after Jarrod was done with Riley, he just grabbed Breezy and slit her throat before throwing her down the shaft as well. Morgan was inside the car, watching, horrified, but too afraid to drive away and get the police. In fact, it took her 3 months to get the courage to break it off with Jarrod and speak to the officers. And this only happened because Jarrod had recently been arrested for some previous parole violations. He couldn't hurt Morgan from there. This was truly the tragic end of a young couple who were in love and had their whole lives ahead of them.
My brother didn't deserve this, and neither did she. We had a whole life. We had a whole life to live. She was only 17, he was 18.
In the small community of Eureka, this news made giant waves. Imagine thinking you know everyone and that you live in one big happy family, only to hear about Jarrod Baum. Many Eureka residents felt like they'd been living a lie. They'd been living close to a real-life monster. Jarrod Baum was immediately transported to the Utah County Jail and charged with 2 counts of aggravated murder, kidnapping, and discretion of a body.
Mr. Baum could die for what he allegedly did.
While Jarrod was facing the death penalty, Morgan was also charged with obstruction of justice. If she had come to the police earlier, Riley and Breezy's families would have gotten closure sooner. Plus, letting a known murderer roam free is a great risk to everyone else. In this case, fear is no excuse. The trial was going long and was very emotionally draining. It dragged for 3 years, and all the while Jarrod insisted he was not guilty. Just look at how he looked at the victims' families during his first court appearance. Sheesh. The model face of a psychopathic killer. No remorse, just silent threats. In February 2021, the case made headlines once more, as Riley and Breezy's families were still waiting for the trial to begin. Amanda had reached a breaking point. As the case dragged, she was only becoming more and more emotional. Baum's defense attorneys tried to pin some of the blame on Morgan, using her mom's overdose death and her ex-husband taking his own life as proof that she couldn't be innocent. That's a pretty nasty move. Morgan had nothing to do with either death. Eventually, no connections were found between the deaths in Morgan's family and those of Riley and Breezy. The judge added that Morgan was part of a family with substance abuse problems. Jarrod and his defense team continued to attack Morgan, as the whole case was based on her testimony. If they could prove she was mentally unstable, they could potentially argue that she was lying about the whole thing. Luckily, this move didn't hold. The most serious thing Morgan did was tow Riley's Jeep. Yes, it was her, not Lee, but she only claimed she did so because Jarrod threatened to take her life. Morgan was sent to a psychiatric facility for her sentence. Meanwhile, Bill and the rest of the 2 families pressed the jury for a death penalty for Jarrod Baum.
She and Riley won't be having a nice life. They won't have one.
You want justice.
Oh, I definitely want justice.
But in November 2021, a Utah Republican prosecutor announced he will no longer seek the death penalty in any of his cases, in a move to end capital punishment all over the U.S. In February 2022, the case finally came to a close, but it was the most costly and time-consuming case in the whole history of Utah.
This case predates me, and it is easily, without question, the case that has through which we have expended the greatest resources in the history of Utah, of any case in Utah County.
Jarrod Baum was found guilty of all counts and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Well, I don't know if we're allowed to say we were happy, but we were happy.
Still, Riley and Breezy's families know that no amount of years Jarrod spends behind bars will make up for what he did back in 2017. His lack of remorse only adds to the tragedy and makes the closure all the more difficult. Hey, thanks for watching. As always, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more. Till next time, and stay safe.